The rain fell gently on the cobbled streets of Whitethorn, a quiet village tucked away on the southern coast of England. Eleanor Bell stepped out of the black cab that had brought her from the train station, her suitcase in one hand and an envelope in the other. She paused in front of the ivy-covered cottage she had inherited from her grandmother, who had passed away only 2 weeks earlier. The scent of salt and wet earth filled the air. Eleanor hadn't been back to Whitethorn since she was 15. Life in London had pulled her far away. University, work, friends. But now, at 32, she had returned, not just because of the cottage, but because of the letter. The one her grandmother had left for her. The one she was never supposed to find. She unlocked the creaky wooden door and stepped into a house preserved in time. Doilies on the armchairs. A faded photo of her mother by the fireplace. And that scent, lavender and old books. She placed her suitcase down and looked at the envelope again. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her grandmother's, but hurried. Almost frantic. She didn't open it right away. Something about the way it had been hidden, wedged behind the false drawer in the study desk, unnerved her. Why not leave it out with the will? Why not tell someone? She spent the evening exploring each room, the memories rushing in with every corner. Her mother's laughter in the kitchen. The way her grandmother would braid her hair on the porch. But something felt off. The grandfather clock in the hallway, broken since Eleanor was a child, was now ticking again. A cupboard door in the parlor wouldn't stay closed. After supper, Eleanor sat in the study with the letter in front of her. She lit a candle, the dim light flickering across the yellowed paper. Slowly, she opened the envelope and began to read. My dearest Eleanor. If you are reading this, it means the secrets I have kept for more than 50 years are finally yours to uncover. There is a reason your mother never returned to Whitethorn. There is something buried, something that must stay hidden. Her hands trembled. She reread the last line. There is a key in the attic. And a name I swore I would never say again. Thomas Ainsley. Eleanor blinked. Thomas Ainsley. She had never heard that name in her life. As the candle flickered and the wind howled through the chimney, Eleanor knew one thing for certain. This visit to Whitethorn was about to reveal far more than an inheritance. The following morning, Eleanor awoke to a pale gray sky. The rain had stopped, leaving the village cloaked in a thick fog that curled between chimneys and hedgerows. She lay in bed for a moment, the letter's words still echoing in her mind. Thomas Ainsley. A key in the attic. The name and the message clung to her like damp clothes. She climbed the creaking staircase to the attic door, hesitant. The lock, rusted and old, gave way with a sharp twist. The attic smelled of dust, mothballs and something metallic, almost like old coins. Eleanor stepped inside, ducking under wooden beams, brushing past old trunks and boxes filled with brittle newspapers, yellowing lace, and childhood keepsakes. Her grandmother's handwriting had said there was a key. Not where, just that it was here. She moved slowly, lifting lids, checking drawers. Nothing. Then, behind a stack of books near the far window, she noticed a small, metal tin. It was navy blue with a silver clasp. She opened it. Inside was a key. It was ornate, bronze, with an elaborate crest at the top. Not like a house key, but more like one for a chest or a box. Eleanor turned it over in her palm. Heavy. Cold. She didn't know what it unlocked, but instinct told her it mattered. Deeply. Still holding the key, she moved to the attic window. Through the fog, she could just make out the village church steeple and beyond it, the vast expanse of the sea. Somewhere out there was the truth. Back downstairs, she returned to the study. She laid the key on the desk and took the letter from her pocket again. There was more. Whitethorn is not what it seems. You will be watched. Trust no one but Mrs. Holloway. Eleanor frowned. Mrs. Holloway? The name sounded familiar. Yes, her grandmother's old friend. She ran the local bookshop on Hawthorne Lane. Hadn't seen her in years, but Eleanor remembered her as a kind woman who always smelled of cinnamon and ink. She pulled on her coat and set off into the village. The streets were nearly empty, the fog muffling every sound. She passed the bakery, the post office, and finally reached the bookshop. A hand-painted sign hung above the door. Holloway's Books and Curiosities. The bell chimed softly as she stepped inside. The warmth and scent of old pages wrapped around her. An elderly woman appeared from the back room. Eleanor Bell, she said, smiling faintly. You're the image of your grandmother. You remember me, Eleanor said, surprised. Mrs. Holloway nodded. Of course. And I've been expecting you. Eleanor froze. Expecting me? She said if you ever came back, it would mean the past was rising. Come. Let's talk in the back. They moved behind the counter to a sitting area surrounded by leather-bound books and jars filled with what looked like dried herbs and feathers. Mrs. Holloway poured tea, her hands steady despite her age. She left you a letter, didn't she? The woman asked. Eleanor nodded. She mentioned someone named Thomas Ainsley. And a key. Mrs. Holloway's face darkened. I was afraid of that. Who was he? Eleanor asked. Mrs. Holloway set her teacup down with a quiet clink. Thomas Ainsley was once the vicar of Whitethorn. During the war. He was dangerous. Obsessive. He believed something sacred was buried here. Something older than Christianity itself. He wasn't mad, Eleanor. He was brilliant. And that made him terrifying. Eleanor's mouth went dry. And my family? Mrs. Holloway looked down. Your mother and your grandmother tried to stop him. They paid the price. Eleanor gripped the edge of the table. What does the key unlock? The old woman shook her head. That I don't know. But I suspect it's connected to the old chapel ruins near the cliffs. She used to go there in secret. Eleanor felt her heart race. A part of her wanted to walk away. To sell the cottage, forget the key, and return to her quiet London life. But something inside her had shifted. A curiosity laced with dread. A whisper in her blood. That night, Eleanor stood in front of the mirror in her grandmother's room, the key hanging from a string around her neck. Her reflection seemed strange. Older, almost haunted. From somewhere beneath the floorboards, she thought she heard movement. A soft creak. And then, a whisper. Not in her head. Real. Just barely audible. Eleanor. The morning fog had thickened into a silvery veil, making Whitethorn appear like a village lost to time. Eleanor dressed in her thickest coat, slipped the bronze key into her pocket, and stepped outside, her breath a pale cloud in the cold air. She followed the winding path that led past the cemetery and into the woods, guided only by Mrs. Holloway's quiet directions. The air grew colder the deeper she walked, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The chapel, long forgotten, lay in ruins atop the cliffs, half consumed by ivy and time. She found it just as Mrs. Holloway had described. Its stone arch barely intact, stained glass windows long shattered, and its altar cracked in two. Yet something about it felt alive. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled. Eleanor walked to the altar, and there, carved into the floor beneath it, she found a metal plate with an old lock. Her heart raced. She reached into her coat and pulled out the key. It slid in with a perfect fit, and with a groaning click, the lock gave way. The plate lifted slowly, revealing a set of narrow stone stairs leading into darkness. She hesitated, pulse thundering in her ears. But there was no turning back now. She descended into the hidden chamber. The air grew damp and heavy. The walls, lined with crude carvings and faded symbols, pulsed with strange energy. At the bottom, she found a small chamber, lit only by a faint shaft of light filtering through cracks above. And in the center, resting on a stone pedestal, was a box. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Smooth obsidian, etched with symbols she couldn't read, the box seemed to hum. Eleanor reached out, hesitating just an inch from its surface. As her fingers brushed it, the carvings glowed faintly. And then she heard the voice again. Clearer this time. Do not open it. She turned, heart slamming against her ribs. No one was there. The voice continued, soft but urgent. Once it is opened, it cannot be undone. Eleanor stepped back, trembling. The letter hadn't warned her about this. She glanced around the chamber, searching for another clue. Then she noticed a symbol on the far wall. An eye within a sun. She'd seen it before. On her grandmother's pendant. The one she'd packed away years ago, never knowing what it meant. She had to speak to Mrs. Holloway again. Back at the bookshop, Eleanor slammed the door behind her, rattling the bell. Mrs. Holloway looked up from behind the counter, her eyes narrowing the moment she saw Eleanor's face. You found it. There's a box, Eleanor said breathlessly. And a voice. It told me not to open it. Mrs. Holloway's expression darkened. Then it's beginning. The curse. It's not just stories, Eleanor. Eleanor's voice cracked. What is it? What was he looking for down there? The older woman motioned for her to sit. The chapel was built over something much older. An altar. Pagan. Pre-Roman. Thomas Ainsley believed it was the resting place of knowledge forbidden to man. He thought he could control it. And my family? Eleanor whispered. Your grandmother was the last keeper. Her role was to ensure the box was never opened. Every generation, one woman is chosen. The box calls to her. It's calling you now. Eleanor felt her blood chill. I didn't choose this. None of them did. A silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Finally, Mrs. Holloway said, you need the pendant. Without it, you'll never resist the pull. Go back to the cottage. It should be with your grandmother's personal things. Eleanor stood, her legs trembling. As she turned to leave, Mrs. Holloway added, and Eleanor, don't return to the chapel without me. That night, Whitethorn seemed restless. Winds howled through the trees, shutters clattered, and shadows moved just beyond the candlelight. Eleanor found the pendant in a jewelry box beneath her grandmother's bed. It was silver, set with a dark stone, and bore the same sun-eye symbol. As soon as she touched it, a wave of warmth spread through her. The whispers fell silent. But then the cottage shook. The mirror on the wall cracked down the center. The fireplace flared without warning. And from the attic came a single, echoing thud. Someone or something had returned. The attic door creaked open with a reluctant groan. Dust swirled in the narrow beam of Eleanor's torch as she climbed the old wooden ladder. Each step groaned under her weight, echoing eerily through the stillness of the house. The air up there was different. Thicker, as if the space itself hadn't breathed in years. Eleanor swept the light across the room. Forgotten furniture lay beneath dusty white sheets, boxes sagged under the weight of time, and in the far corner stood a single, covered frame, taller than her, facing the wall. Another chill ran down her spine. She stepped closer, each footfall muffled by the thick dust underfoot. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached out and tugged the cloth away. The portrait stared back at her. It was a painting of a woman. Her eyes were the same shade as Eleanor's, deep hazel, almost gold in the light. She wore the silver pendant around her neck, the same one Eleanor had just found. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held an intensity that pierced straight through. And at the bottom, in faded gold script, was a name. Isolde Ainsley. Eleanor's great-grandmother. The attic temperature seemed to drop further. Just behind her, the attic door slammed shut. She spun around, heart racing. But no one was there. And then she saw it. In the corner, something scratched into the wooden beam. She leaned in closer, brushing away the grime. Beware the mirror. The same phrase was in the letter. Her breath caught. Suddenly, her torch flickered, then died. She was plunged into darkness. Eleanor reached for her phone, fumbled to turn on its torch, and managed a weak beam of light. She backed away from the wall, her pulse thudding in her ears. The mirror downstairs, the one that had cracked, flashed into her mind. What if it wasn't just old glass? She stumbled down the ladder, heart hammering. The house now felt entirely wrong. Unfamiliar. As though someone had been rearranging it in her absence. She reached the lounge. The cracked mirror stood still, reflecting the flickering candlelight. But something was different. In the mirror's reflection, the hallway behind her was empty. But when she turned around, a woman was standing there. Tall, pale, eyes like hers, wearing the pendant. Eleanor screamed. But when she turned back to face the hallway, there was nothing. The mirror had lied. Mrs. Holloway arrived 20 minutes later, summoned by a frantic call. Eleanor, pale and shaking, explained everything. The attic, the portrait, the warning. Mrs. Holloway examined the mirror silently, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small pouch. She sprinkled a handful of salt along the frame and muttered words Eleanor didn't understand. The boundary is weakening, she said grimly. The box. It's not just a container. It's a seal. Eleanor swallowed hard. A seal for what? Mrs. Holloway looked at her, grave. For the thing your great-grandmother tried to keep from this world. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay curled beneath thick blankets, the pendant clutched in her palm. Outside, The wind howled like it had a voice. The mirror in the lounge had been covered with a thick blanket and salted, but still she didn't trust it. She drifted into uneasy dreams, visions of a burning chapel, a woman screaming in a language she didn't know, and that same portrait of Isolde Ainsley, eyes full of sorrow, whispering something she couldn't hear. She awoke with a start. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. Then came the knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. Deliberate. She crept to the window and peered through the curtain. No one stood on the doorstep. But at the foot of the door was an envelope. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single slip of paper. "You are not the only one it calls to." Her fingers went numb. Someone else was involved. Someone who knew about the box. Someone who wanted it open. And they were already close. The morning after the letter arrived, Eleanor didn't wake up refreshed. She hadn't really slept, only drifted in and out of shallow dreams haunted by soft voices and shifting shadows. She sat up, the silver pendant still clutched in her hand, now warm from her grip. Outside, the sky was bruised with gray clouds, casting the village in a pale gloom. But inside the house, a stillness lingered. Not the peaceful kind. The sort that warned you something was waiting. She hadn't told Mrs. Holloway about the envelope yet. Somehow, it felt dangerous. As if saying it aloud would give whoever wrote it more power. Instead, she slipped it into her coat pocket and moved downstairs. The mirror was still covered. But as she passed the lounge, she could feel something from it, like eyes following her, pressing against her back. She made tea, hands trembling as she poured. Every creak of the house made her flinch. Her thoughts wandered to her great-grandmother. Why would Isolde have gone to such lengths to hide this thing? Why send a letter now, after all these years? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from under the floor. She froze. It wasn't a pipe. It wasn't the wind. It was deliberate. Measured. Like someone knocking. She followed the sound through the hall to the dining room. The tapping grew louder the closer she got. She dropped to her knees and pressed her ear to the wooden floorboards. Tap, tap. Then a whisper. Too faint to make out. But definitely a voice. Whispering her name. Eleanor. Eleanor. She scrambled back, breath shallow. This was no ordinary haunting. Mrs. Holloway arrived just before noon, summoned again by Eleanor's shaky call. She brought tools this time, a leather-bound book, bundles of dried herbs, and a strange iron key. "There's something sealed in this house," she said without preamble. "And the seals are failing." Eleanor explained the knocking. The voice. The letter. Mrs. Holloway's face darkened. "You need to see what's under this house," she said. Together, they pulled aside the dining room rug and pried open the old hatch Eleanor hadn't even known existed. A steep wooden staircase led into the dark earth beneath the cottage. It smelled of damp stone and something older. Something that didn't belong. Mrs. Holloway lit a lantern and descended first. "Don't speak down here unless necessary," she warned. "Words carry differently." The space below was a root cellar, long forgotten. But one wall was wrong. Bricked up hastily, uneven. Symbols carved into the mortar had been half scratched away. The rest of the cellar was quiet, but the air felt tight. "It's behind there," Mrs. Holloway said grimly. "Something is soul-bound." Eleanor approached the wall. Her pendant grew warm. The silver throbbed gently against her chest. She reached out, and as her fingers brushed the stone, a voice burst into her mind. Not from outside but inside. Like a memory that wasn't hers. "Do not break the chain." She jerked back. "It's speaking to me." Mrs. Holloway looked at her closely. "You have her blood. It'll try to sway you. Show you visions. It will offer you things. Do not listen." Eleanor's eyes widened. "But what does it want?" Mrs. Holloway exhaled slowly. "To return. To finish what it started. And you're the key now." They returned upstairs in silence. Eleanor's mind raced. Someone out there wanted her to open this. And if she didn't stop them, they might try to do it themselves. That night, Eleanor locked every door and window. But it didn't matter. Because when she woke around 3 in the morning, she wasn't in her bed. She was in the lounge. Standing before the mirror. The cloth had been removed. And inside the reflection, the room looked the same, except for one thing. There was someone standing behind her. She turned, heart hammering. Nothing. But when she looked back into the mirror, the figure was still there. A woman. Tall. Dressed in black. Her face was turned away. But slowly, agonizingly slowly, she began to turn. And that's when Eleanor saw her own face. But not as she was. Older. Paler. Eyes glowing with something inhuman. She stumbled back in horror, knocking over a lamp. When she looked again, the reflection was normal. Only she remained. But on the mirror's surface, someone had written in fog. "You will open it. You always do." The message on the mirror lingered long after the mist had faded. Eleanor stood frozen, trying to make sense of what she had seen. Her reflection, older, hollow-eyed, had looked back with a strange familiarity, as if a version of herself was trapped somewhere, waiting to be let out. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she paced the lounge, lights on, eyes darting to every shadow that stretched across the floor. The mirror, now uncovered, stood as a silent witness to whatever game was unfolding. When morning finally came, she phoned her mother. She didn't mention the mirror or the whispers, only asked vague questions about great-grandmother Isolde. Her mother was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're not the first to ask. A man came to the house when I was your age, asking about Isolde. Said she promised him something. Left him a key. He never returned." A key. Eleanor's heart skipped. Yes. A strange one. Iron. Looked almost ancient. The key. Mrs. Holloway had one just like it. Did you ever find out who he was? No. But he left something behind. A book. I kept it. It's in the attic, I think. That afternoon, Eleanor made the hour-long drive to her mother's house. The attic was cluttered with boxes and dust-thick memories, but eventually she found the book. It had no title. Just worn leather and a faint sigil burned into the cover, one that matched the carving in the bricked wall under her floor. Inside were pages of spidery handwriting. Diaries. Descriptions. Rituals. Warnings. She read in silence as the dust motes danced in the fading light. And then she found a page that made her blood run cold. The mirror ritual must never be repeated. The reflection is not merely light. It is memory. Intention. A doorway. Once opened, it remembers you. Eleanor slammed the book shut. It had seen her. And now, it remembered her. On the way home, she called Mrs. Holloway. I saw it. My own reflection, but twisted. And it spoke to me. Then we don't have much time, Mrs. Holloway replied grimly. It's trying to tether itself to you. If it succeeds, it'll come through. Come through what? The mirror. That night, Eleanor lit every candle she could find. The house glowed in flickering warmth, but it did little to chase away the growing dread. Mrs. Holloway arrived just after midnight. She brought a bundle of white sage, 3 bowls of ash, and the iron key. You need to see something, she said. Together, they went down into the root cellar again. The bricked wall seemed to pulse now, as if something behind it was breathing. Mrs. Holloway placed the iron key into a small slot Eleanor hadn't noticed before. With a grinding noise, a portion of the wall gave way. Behind it was a narrow corridor, so dark that even the lantern's light seemed to shrink. Eleanor hesitated. You don't have to do this alone, Mrs. Holloway said gently. But it's your blood that binds it. Only you can stop it. They stepped inside. The corridor led to a small room. Circular. Walls covered in mirrors. Cracked, warped, ancient. In the center was a stone pedestal, and atop it, a silver bowl filled with blackened ash. Eleanor stepped closer. One of the mirrors flashed. For a split second, she saw her mother. Crying. Another flashed. Her father. Screaming. Another. Herself. Laughing as flames rose around her. She stumbled back, heart pounding. These mirrors show what it wants you to become, Mrs. Holloway whispered. It twists love, grief, desire, all to make you open the gate. Why me? Because a soul denied it. And blood calls to blood. It will try to finish through you what it could not through her. Eleanor stared into the blackened ash. And suddenly she knew. This wasn't just a haunting. It was an inheritance. And if she didn't break it now, it would consume not only her, but everyone she loved. She turned to Mrs. Holloway, voice firm. "Tell me how to seal it." But before the words could leave her lips completely, the ground beneath them trembled. And a voice echoed through the chamber, deep and layered with centuries. "You're too late, child of Isolde. The gate is already open." The chamber trembled beneath their feet. Dust fell from the arched ceiling above, catching the lantern's light in golden specks. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as the voice, deep, ancient, and far too human, echoed through the room again. "You've come too far to turn back," it said. "You opened the seal. Now you must finish it." Mrs. Holloway stepped forward, clutching the iron key in one hand and a string of jet-black beads in the other. Her face was pale, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's awake. It's aware of you now. That means we only have moments before it tries to cross." Eleanor backed away from the pedestal, her eyes darting to the mirrors. Each one was beginning to ripple like disturbed water. Faces emerged in the glass, dozens of them, flickering like old film. Some looked like Eleanor. Others were not human at all. "Tell me what to do," Eleanor said, her voice firm despite the tremble in her limbs. Mrs. Holloway handed her a small vial. "This is sacred ash. Your great-grandmother collected it during the sealing ritual, the one she never completed. You must scatter it in a circle around the pedestal. It will contain the energy, temporarily." Eleanor moved quickly, careful not to step too close to the mirrors. As she poured the ash, the room dimmed. The flame in the lantern flickered violently, then flared blue. A high-pitched wail echoed from the glass. One of the mirrors shattered, sending shards across the floor like falling stars. From its fractured remains, a shape began to form, twisting, shadowed, with red glowing eyes that locked on Eleanor. Mrs. Holloway threw the beads to the ground. They burst with a crackling sound, forming a protective ring of flame that separated them from the creature. "It's trying to anchor itself to your pain," she shouted. "Don't let it." Eleanor's mind reeled. Her father's betrayal, her mother's secrets, the isolation of living in this cold, haunted house. All the grief, all the resentment, it all rose in a single wave. She clenched her fists. "You won't have me." But the shadow grinned. "You invited me. Every time you looked into the mirror and hated what you saw, you opened the door a little more." Suddenly, Eleanor saw herself, truly saw herself. In the mirror directly across the room, her reflection stared back not with horror but sadness. She was crying. Not a monster, not evil, just broken. It clicked. "This is how it feeds," Eleanor whispered. "It doesn't create darkness. It reflects it." She stepped toward the pedestal, then toward the central mirror, the only one that remained whole. The others around it were cracked, screaming, shaking. She raised the remaining ash above her head. The shadow surged forward with a roar. Mrs. Holloway cried out, pulling a blade from her coat. But Eleanor didn't move. She let the creature come closer, and closer, until its claws were inches from her face. Then she dropped the ash. A wind unlike anything she'd felt before howled through the chamber, lifting her hair and extinguishing the lantern. Every mirror lit with white flame. The creature screamed, a sound so guttural it rattled her teeth, and then vanished into a burst of shadow and glass. Silence fell. The mirrors were gone. All of them. All that remained was the empty pedestal, and the faint scent of lavender and fire. Eleanor fell to her knees, trembling. Mrs. Holloway joined her moments later, breathing hard, sweat glistening on her brow. "You did it," she whispered. "You broke the tether." Eleanor looked up, her eyes burning. "Is it over?" But Mrs. Holloway didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the center of the room, where a small metal box had been dislodged beneath the pedestal. She opened it. Inside was a letter, addressed to Eleanor, in her great-grandmother's elegant, looping handwriting. She read it aloud. "To the one who finds this, I'm sorry. I couldn't finish what I started. My strength failed me, but I see now that the line must continue. Not with power, but with choice. If you read this, you've already made the decision. This house, this legacy, it's yours to carry or end. Whatever you choose, do so in the light." Eleanor clutched the letter to her chest. Her voice cracked. "She wanted me to choose." "Yes, Mrs. Holloway said. And you did. You chose to fight. But as they ascended the stairs back to the surface, Eleanor paused at the last step. The air was still. The silence too thick. And then she saw it, etched faintly into the wood of the cellar door. A new message. Written in the same elegant hand. One door closes. Another must open. The old door groaned open, revealing the night outside. Eleanor stepped into the cold, the stars above gleaming with a strange clarity, as if they too were watching. Behind her, Mrs. Holloway lingered at the threshold, eyes scanning the shadows of the estate. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the distant echo of voices long silenced. Eleanor clutched the letter tightly in one hand, the final words repeating in her mind. One door closes. Another must open. What does it mean? She asked softly. Mrs. Holloway's answer came slowly. It means the house is done with what it needed to show you. But your family's legacy, your grandmother's choices, your mother's silence, there's more. That message wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. An invitation to what? To the final truth. They returned to the manor, now silent but subtly altered. Where once there were cobwebs, now clean corners. The scent of old lavender lingered, stronger than ever. Something in the house had shifted, like a great breath held for generations had finally been exhaled. In the drawing room, Eleanor noticed a painting had fallen askew. She moved to fix it and behind it found a panel in the wall, one she'd never seen before. It was faintly marked with a symbol that matched the wax seal from her great-grandmother's letter. With a glance to Mrs. Holloway, she pressed the panel. It clicked open. Inside was a narrow staircase, descending into darkness. Eleanor hesitated only a second before stepping inside. As she moved downward, the scent of cedar and earth grew stronger. Her footsteps echoed, swallowed by the thick stone walls. At the bottom she found another door, this one carved with the family crest, now faded with age. A mirror split in two, a serpent coiled at its base. She pushed it open. The chamber beyond was unlike anything she'd seen. Not dark and decayed like the cellar, but glowing, lit by hundreds of candles suspended in glass orbs. In the center, a stone altar bore a leather-bound tome. Beside it, a silver locket. She approached and opened the book. Inside, written in different hands over generations, were stories. Not spells. Not curses. Just accounts. Her family's truths. Each page was a confession, a memory, or a warning. Secrets passed from one woman to another. She read a line out loud. I chose silence to protect my daughter. But in silence she suffered more. Her mother's hand. Another line, dated earlier. The mirror took from me my sister. I swore never to let it take another. Her great-grandmother. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. This wasn't a legacy of power. It was a legacy of pain, of women burdened by knowledge too heavy to carry alone. And now it was hers. Mrs. Holloway stepped beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Now you know. This was never about defeating darkness. It was about choosing how to live with it. Eleanor nodded slowly. And I choose to end it here. She took the locket and opened it. Inside was a photograph of a woman, her great-grandmother, holding a child, and a folded piece of paper with one word written. Forgive. She placed the locket on the altar, then poured the last of the sacred ash into the small brazier beside the book. With a single match, she set it aflame. The flames danced golden, then white, then vanished. And with them, the weight of generations seemed to lift. Eleanor left the chamber and sealed the door behind her. When she stepped outside, dawn was breaking over the trees. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because the house had changed, but because she had.